Good evening. Welcome to the Billy Wilder Theater, home of the public programs for the UCLA Film and Television Archive. My name is Paul Malcolm. I'm the senior public programmer for the archive. I want to thank all the individuals and organizations that helped make tonight's screening possible. All of the archive screenings in the Wilder are free thanks to a gift from an anonymous donor, and we are grateful to them for their support. This screening has also been made possible with the essential support of our co-presenting partner at the Yanai Initiative at UCLA. I want to give a special thank you to Yanai Director Michael Emmerich and Associate Director Elizabeth Lester for everything they do to help support archive programming right there. I want to thank our many community partners helping us get the word out about tonight's screening. First, the Consulate General of Japan in Los Angeles, the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center, the Japan Foundation Los Angeles, Japan House Los Angeles, the Japanese American newspaper Rafo Shimpo, UCLA Humanities, and the West Los Angeles Sawtell Neighborhood Council. And then finally, I want to thank our theater manager, Lauren Brown, for her work on this program, along with our chief studio projectionist, Alex Blevins, and the members of the Hammer AV team who are providing essential technical support for this special program. So a round of applause for everybody, please. So it is always exciting to discover a classic film long thought lost, or to be introduced to the work of an overlooked filmmaker finally getting their due. I like to think those are the kinds of experiences that are the stock in trade of what we do in archive public programming. It's quite another thing altogether, however, to learn about the existence of an entirely new and unique filmmaking and exhibition practice, and then again to see the work produced by that practice brought back to the big screen for the first time in decades. That's something really special. Let's have a round of applause for that. That is really amazing. So that is something really special that comes along very rarely and can change the way one thinks about the entire field of film historiography and archival work. That's how I felt working with the Yanai Initiative, our colleagues at Waseda University, and so many amazing performers and musicians who were part of the Japanese Benshi programs that we've done over the last few years. How many people came to the Benshi shows? Raise your hand for those. Yay. So, but if I had any pretensions that those Benshi programs finally completed the full picture of Japanese film history, those pretensions were quickly dispelled when Eric Faden at Bucknell University reached out to us about the work of the Japanese Paper Film Project. Tonight's program is a really wonderful night of discovery, and I want to thank Eric, Bucknell University, and everyone involved with the project for bringing their efforts to UCLA and the Billy Wilder Theater. In a moment, Eric will come up to tell us more about this fascinating aspect of Japanese film history, but before that, I'll just give you a little brief overview of the show. So the main program tonight is a selection of short films curated by Eric from the Paper Film Project that were digitally restored by his team. Some of the films tonight will be presented with original recorded soundtracks, and others will be screened with live musical accompaniment. Eric will invite our two accompanists out shortly after his talk, but I want to hear, let's first of all get a round of applause for them right now. Yoko Tamaki on the koto and Hikaru Tamaki on cello. Let's give a round of applause for them to come out soon. So now, please help me welcome to the stage Eric Faden.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all so much for coming out to the program tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about paper films and kind of provide you some context and also tell you about our preservation efforts. Mainly because when I first heard about Japanese paper films in Japan, I never knew such a thing existed. And then the more people in Japan that I spoke to had never heard of it, and then everyone I spoke to in the United States wasn't familiar with it either. So I thought a little bit of background might be helpful, and then a little bit about how we brought these films kind of back to life. So here's the story. It starts in 2019 in Kyoto, and I had just won a research fellowship to study Japanese magic lantern slides, and I started my kind of archival work at a place called the Kyoto Toy Film Museum. And if you ever go to Kyoto, it is a super cool museum to go to. I highly recommend it. But the head of the museum is a gentleman named Yoneo Ota, and I was very excited to meet with him and to sit down and tell him about my project, and I did. And in the most polite Japanese, he said, "This is a terrible idea. And this was not exactly what I wanted to hear after moving my wife and children 6,713 miles to another country to do this work. But Ota Sensei may have had a kind of ulterior motive. What he said is you should be studying something else. And he took out a box, kind of like this box, and inside that box was a reel of film like this. And I know you can't see this very well, so let me put it up here. But this is paper. So you can see it's solid in the back, unlike kind of 35 millimeter film that's translucent. And I hadn't really seen anything like this before. And he not only had that film, he had boxes of these films. And so I was very excited to check these out. And I was like, oh, can we watch some? Because he even showed me a projector that is used for these films. And his response was absolutely impossible. We cannot watch these films. And he then explained to me that the films over the years have become very brittle, that the kind of glued splices of the films were starting to fall apart, and that the projectors are pretty rough on the movies. And basically every museum and archive and collector who had the films was too scared to look at the films out of fear of destroying them. And to give you a sense of how easy this is one of the films that we worked on, and the paper basically just disintegrates and starts to fall apart. And don't be too upset, because we actually did preserve this film. So we brought it back to life. We were at a different show and the entire audience groaned, and it was like, it's okay. This one's back together. So that's kind of when the Japanese paper film project was born, because Ota Sensei basically kind of wondered aloud of if only someone could come along and figure out a way to save and digitize and preserve these films. And like an idiot, I was like, I could probably do that. And full disclosure, I have no idea how to do any of that. But that's when the project first got off the ground. So let me tell you a little bit about the films themselves. They're manufactured only for a short period of time, from 1932 to 38. There were 3 companies that made them, 2 of them based in Tokyo, 1 of them based in Osaka. And the films were 27 millimeters, except when they're 26 or 28. They're both live action films as well as animated films. And one of the companies also sold blank film with the idea that you would perhaps create your own movies. And we were very excited to hopefully find some of these, and we did. You'll see a kind of very rudimentary one this evening. They're relatively short, about 1 to 4 minutes, though we found a number of films that are multi-part films, so that part 1 connects to the next reel and the next reel. So those can run up to about 12 minutes. Two of the companies has a single perforation, and unlike traditional celluloid film, they do not run down the side of the film, but run at the top and the bottom of the frame. The other company has 2 perforations. They each make their own kind of proprietary projector. So even paper films between the 2 companies are not compatible with the projectors that they sold. In terms of our preservation efforts, the kind of first year in Kyoto that I was working with Ota Sensei at the Toy Film Museum, I tried a number of different techniques for preserving the movies. And my first idea was that I would just photograph the films frame by frame with a camera. And so I went to the Kohan, which is kind of like the Ace Hardware of Kyoto. And I went to Yodobashi Camera to get a remote for my camera. And I stole a whole bunch of stuff from my coworker's desk drawer. And I cobbled together a kind of rig that could move the film along. And I would just take each frame, a picture, move the film, take another picture. And this takes a long time. So about a minute of film often took 2 or 3 hours to photograph. And it was also really prone to error because by the time I was in the third or fourth hour, you just don't care anymore. You're just like moving the film and taking pictures. So the film still needed a lot of work in post-production to kind of get them stabilized. But it also taught me a lot about what we need to do to be able to digitize the films. The main challenges are that the films are glued together. They're cut into paper strips, and then the strips are joined every 40 frames. So somebody's job was to get 2 pieces of paper and some glue and to glue them together all day long. And I think films in the morning may have been a little bit better than films done in the afternoon, because we noticed that the splices are really irregular. And the problem is that then affects how high the frame is. The other issue was the perforations, because sometimes they're at the top of the frame where they should be, and sometimes they float down into the frame, and sometimes they're not there at all. So this kind of helped us figure out a design for what kind of machine we needed to come up with. The problem here is that a traditional film scanner is kind of defeated by all these irregularities. So even if we tried to scan the film in a conventional way, it would eventually very quickly fall out of sync after just a couple of feet of trying to bring the film through. So what I needed to build was some sort of machine, but I don't know how to build a machine. So what I built was a team where I reached out to colleagues and students at Bucknell University in mechanical engineering, in computer science, in East Asian studies, history, film media studies, and we decided to build something. And the solution here was kind of a 2-stage solution. There was some hardware, and film scanners often will kind of move the film like one frame and then take a picture and then move the film. So it's called an intermittent movement. This is fairly lethal for paper films because the kind of starting and stopping of the movement just shreds the movies. So what we initially kind of planned out was a machine that would just transport the film in motion so that it never stopped, and we would actually kind of film the movie going in movement. And our student Alina Arco built this, and it essentially lets the film just kind of run. It has very minimal touch points, only 2 touch points that actually come in contact with the film. And it was very light so that we could go to Japan, since the films, which are often classified as national treasures, couldn't come to us. But as you could see, it's not really entertaining to look at a movie film strip just kind of going by. We needed to turn it back into a film. So what we did was come up with a software solution as well, where we kind of created bespoke software. And what the software does is use machine learning to try to find a frame. And so green is a good frame, and the reds are kind of bad frames that we skip over. And so what happens is we keep all the good frames and then stitch those together to kind of reconstitute the movie. So here's what the original scan looks like, and this is what the first kind of processed version looks like. And as you can see, it's starting to look like a movie at this point. From that first processed version, we could then use some off-the-shelf software to really stabilize the image. So you could see the scanner kind of moving around, but the image itself is absolutely kind of locked into place. And from there, we could do some basic color grading and some preservation work to get something that can be a projected movie. So our machine we called Kyo Renren. which is a Japanese yokai, which is a kind of spirit or ghost. And in this case, Kyo Renren was a spirit that guards unread or understudied paper scrolls. And the scrolls kind of reminded me of paper films. And so we decided to update Kyo Renren with a super cool logo. And it even got laser etched onto our machine. And this is because mechanical engineers have like laser etchers, and I didn't want to hold them back. So they needed something to do. So they also built this kind of beautiful kind of control box for the scanner. There's one other aspect that's kind of interesting here, in that we noticed on some of the films that they would have these numbers, kind of these codes on the beginning of the movie. And so paper films are printed backwards. There'll be a Q&A afterwards, and I'll explain why they're reversed. But we noticed that this code corresponds to records. So these are 78 RPM shellac records, which seem to be just as fragile as Japanese paper films. And we also noticed that the people who collect 1930s Japanese paper films and the people that collect 1930s Japanese 78 shellac records, that's a very small Venn diagram. There's not a lot of crossover between those groups, but we managed to recover a number of the records and to digitize those. And so this evening, you will see some of the films kind of remarried to their soundtracks, which we're very excited about. On the back of the films, there would be the stamp that basically was like a cue point to start the record. So the film would be running, and whoever was projecting the film could then see that mark go by and then start the 78 RPM record, and you had image and sound together. So a couple quick program notes about the films this evening. The first thing is these are preserved films. These are not restored films. So you're going to see dirt, you're going to see scratches. If you have a really, really keen eye, you're going to see fingerprints on some of the frames. And we're a big believer that these material traces tell us a lot about the life of these movies. And so we have left those in. A kind of restored film would be digitally cleansed and look perfect and look like it was made yesterday. But to me, there's something really beautiful about the aesthetic that this is both film and paper. So we have chosen at this point just to preserve the films. The second thing is that because these are short films, the filmmakers and the studios that made these assumed a lot of audience foreknowledge. And this is no longer 1933 Japan. And so our foreknowledge is probably very different than an audience from almost 100 years ago. So on a couple of the films, we have put kind of a notes screen in front of it to give you a sense of what's going on. Some films we're just going to show you, and if it's weird and makes no sense, just enjoy the visuals and the music. That's okay too. And then the very last thing I want to mention is I always think history and context is super important. So 1930s Japan is a very different time period than today's Japan. And this is a time period where they are involved in the Second Sino-Japanese War. The country is becoming incredibly nationalized and leading up to World War II. And the films reflect this. So you're going to see some films that are absolutely adorable. And it's okay to think that they're adorable and to love them and all of that. But we also wanted to include in the program tonight, there's also propaganda films, both propaganda films aimed at children as well as aimed at adults, to kind of get the nation invested in the war efforts. And I think it's always important to kind of acknowledge the context in which the films were originally seen. So with that said, I want to introduce our musical guests tonight, and they are just amazing. They have been collaborating with me in the project almost a year to the day, and they have brought so much to the film. And I hope you could join me in welcoming Yoko Kimura and Hikaru Tamaki on koto and cello.
Well, that was all I thought it was going to be and more. That was amazing. That was amazing. So I have a lot of questions to ask, but I'm going to just ask a few, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. I thought we could start with Eric, just rounding out a little bit more of the context. So who were these films for, and where were they watched? And were they in theaters, at homes?
So we think most of the viewing was for home viewing. There was a kind of practice in Japan of having 35 millimeter in the home. And of course, at this time period, it's all nitrate film, which is very explosive as a kind of unfavorable side effect. And paper films were often marketed as a kind of safer alternative, not that paper doesn't also burn, but it doesn't explode. But as you saw with the film that had the kind of hand-drawn animation on the back, there also appears to be a lot of evidence that these would have been shown as kind of neighborhood or kind of like street corner projection, where maybe one family owns a projector and other families are contributing films, and it was a little bit more communal.
So obviously you talked a little bit about like the huge amount of work and all the people that came together to make these films, but I'm curious. So it seems self-evident, but can you talk a little bit about like why is it important to save these films? So many people came together to help support this project, and what is it about these films that are that sort of compelled you or called you to do this project?
That's a great question. I think for me, as a kind of film scholar, anytime there's a film that you can't see, you want to see it. And these films, I think, because it wasn't just me, but there was a group of kind of archives and collectors and people that were interested that had held on to these movies for 30 or 40 years without being able to view them. I thought there had to be a way that to be able to preserve them. But more importantly, as I've kind of mentioned at other screenings, when you see this project kind of projected up on the screen, everyone, tends to think kind of mission accomplished. But the reality is this is the very beginning of the project, because you can't really research or study or talk about the films until you could see the films. And so we're very, very excited to be able to work with like the Anai Initiative to really kind of find out what these films are about, find out more about who made them, and really begin to kind of research and understand them.
So by way of starting to talk about the musical accompaniment we had tonight, Eric, can you talk about how you met Yoko and Hikaru and how they came to the project?
Sure. Can I tell this story? So the very first screening of these films was a short program at the Museum of the Moving Image in New York City for a symposium called the Orphans Film Symposium. And it's organized by Dan Strebel at New York University, and he does an amazing job. But it's basically a program to bring together archivists and collectors, museum directors, who have films that they don't know what they are. And so the idea is initially to kind of show the films, hoping that other people may have some insight into them, and the kind of symposium has grown out of that. And Dan very kindly invited us to show a kind of much abridged version of this program that was only maybe about 20 minutes long. We had some of the sound films finished at that point, but it was just kind of strange to show the sound films with then silence for the films that we don't have soundtracks to. So I Googled best koto player in New York City. And Yoko is the very top hit on that. But But maybe she could talk a little bit more about kind of what was interesting about the project for her.
Yeah, Yoko, tell us a little bit about, first of all, what was your experience or background in accompanying silent film, and what was it about these films in particular that drew you to this work?
Actually, this is my first accompaniment project for film, because but when I have a wonderful email from Eric Sensei, I was so excited because this project is obviously so rare, and me and my husband, we are very big fan of cinema, and I immediately realized this project is really, really precious, and I didn't know what is kami film actually, but so we sometimes watch many Japanese movies like Naruse Mizoguchi, and but we never seen paper film. So I really wanted to be part of this project. So yeah, and
Yeah, it was
yeah.
initially started only with Yoko, but
Mm.
um, I'm a big cinema fan. And when they first had their Zoom meeting, I kind of barged in, and I was so interested in the project, and asked a bunch of questions, and so I kind of made my way through in, and we already played as a duo, so it was sort of a progression that came
Yes.
from the
Um,
initial
yeah.
beginning. Yeah.
Because you might notice koto has only 13 strings. The sound range is very limited. But of course, there are so many sound colors. But I thought it might be better to have my wonderful husband so we can make more music richly and lively. So yeah, so I emailed to Eric Sensei. So maybe we can work together. Yes.
And I was very excited by that because I had also listened to their music, and they have an amazing kind of CD out, but it moves back and forth between kind of Western music and kind of very Japanese music. But I also loved how koto was sometimes more Western and the cello was sometimes more Japanese, and it was just this beautiful blend. And well, you've seen and heard the films and the music, and it really brings the films alive.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I mean, you're obviously both playing traditional classical instruments, but what was your approach to coming up with the accompaniment? Were you thinking we've got to stick with the period of these films, or we really have to present these films for a modern audience? What was your thinking about your musical selections and arrangements?
Yeah, of course we were, very much reference to, popular music in the 1930s, around the time this film was made. These films were made, but we also wanted to, you know, um, bring our own tradition to it, and I think Koto has a rich tradition in theater music and different types of sounds, sound effects. I think more than Western instruments, Japanese instruments is open to many kinds of sounds in their traditional repertoire. So I thought it'll be, well, she thought it'll be very interesting to.
Yes. For example, so the Chushingura, so the 47 Ronin story. For these films, I choose a traditional piece called Yachio Jishi, which was composed in the beginning of Edo period. This piece often used for sword fighting scene at Kabuki Theater. So I really like this piece, and I thought it might be very suitable for choosing films. Yes.
Eric, there's a lot of variety in the selections tonight, from animal antics to war propaganda. I mean, that's a pretty wide range of material. I mean, it just shows to me, it was like, wow. I mean, they were making all different kinds of films in this period. I'm curious, like, though, you were talking about like the sort of the context, the original audience sort of seeing these films. Obviously, there's a lot of period references here. I was wondering, is there I mean, of all the characters we saw, there were a few repeat characters. Was there like a Mickey Mouse of paper films? Was there like an icon that emerged in this? I mean, it looked like there was also a cereal at the end. Like,
Yeah, it was one of the really great pleasures working on kind of when we're processing and putting the films together, seeing we actually get to see them kind of come alive. And so a lot of times when we're scanning them, it's very difficult to actually tell what the film is until we start kind of pulling it all together. And I was just really amazed at the variety of kind of genres and types of movies here. And it really kind of convinced me. We forget in 1930s, projected film in movie theaters was all black and white. And in terms of synchronized sound, that was also only just kind of beginning in Japan. So to be able to have something in your home or your neighborhood that was color and had synchronized sound, I think was really, really special. And as a result, I think the studios making these films really went for kind of very wide range of types of movies. And I'm kind of every time right now we're kind of able to process about 4 to 5 films a week is what our kind of output is. We still have about 50 films to go in terms of what we've scanned. And so I'm very excited to see other types of films that may kind of emerge out of this.
we saw a lot of films with the tanuki, the raccoon dogs. I always love those. But the little boy seemed to be a repeat character. Were there like repeat characters that you're seeing emerge? Like,
there are. So there's one character, kind of Bokohe, who's a kind of historic mythological figure. He repeats in several films. I think he's only in one film in the collection that we showed, but there's at least 3 or 4 other films. Norakuro, the dog that you see, was actually a very popular manga character, and there were also some short animated films with him that weren't paper films. And at first we assumed that the paper films were kind of copies of these animated films, but they're actually unique to paper films. And then the little boy you see is Refi, and the company that made that film is Refshi. So I think he's kind of their mascot. So he appears in several films as well.
does the parrot mascot have a name? Is that like a? I'm curious. We saw the parrot a lot.
Yeah. So the parrot is for Kate e Toki, which kind of translates to home talkie, and that company really emphasized soundtracks. And I think the parrot is kind of the idea of mimicry, of kind of copying sound and mimicking sound. But they do appear in several of the films beyond just being the kind of mascot on the front.
So I got one more question, and we'll turn it over to the audience. We have theater staff with mics. Raise your hand. I'll point to you, and we'll bring a mic to you. And wait for the mic to get to you before you ask the question. So, I'm not sure if this is even possible to know. You said you've got about 50 films you've scanned that you're working on now. But how many paper films do we think have survived? I mean, is there any way of knowing? And are they all in Japan? Have you found any sort of far-flung around? Because sometimes you find American films in a Polish farm somewhere. I mean, it's like, have you had any stories like that?
Yes. So a few were just up on eBay in France, but we already had those films, so we weren't necessarily throwing all of our money at trying to acquire those. So as far as we know, this was mostly a practice in Japan. There are some other kind of what I would call early cinema or kind of cinema adjacent practices that are using paper, but these films were projected. And so most of the other kind of practices we've seen are using paper, but it's usually a device that you look into, and it's not something that's projected up on a screen. But in terms of knowing what's out there, a few of the companies did print catalogs.
Right. Okay.
So we have a sense of kind of what's out there for two of the companies. The third company, Skiboshi, is still a bit of a mystery. But we think we have about 90 to 93% of refshi. So we're getting close on that. Kate Toki, I think we still have a ways to go with what is known to be printed versus what we actually have in our collections.
Yes, one more question about the projector, because there's something really unique about these projector systems, which sounds fascinating. Can you describe that?
So the projectors are crazy. So I'm going to use hand models here to try to explain it, because when I first saw the projector, even in person as a film scholar looking at it, it felt like my mind bent a little bit in trying to understand it. So pretend this is a strip of celluloid film. You would have a big light bulb behind the film, and the film is transparent. So you shine the light through the film, and over here you're going to have a lens, and the lens kind of focuses the light, and then you would have a screen over there, and the film would show on the screen. So with paper film, because it's opaque, you can't put a light behind the film. So instead, the lamp goes in front of the film and bounces light off the film strip. That bounce light goes into the lens, and then it's projected up on screen. And this was explained to me about 4 times in a row. And I was like, there's no way that could possibly work, but it does. And it's kind of extraordinary to see these films come to life. And I'll just say a very, very quick anecdote. One of the people one of the collectors whose collection we've worked with is Tsuyoshi Yamabata. And he is a amazing, interesting, fascinating person. But he works at the Itabashi Science Museum. And he really wanted to see a film projected, but he was too scared to actually use a paper film. So he photocopied a paper film foot by foot and then started assembling it together. And the people at the museum thought this was so fascinating, is they're like, this should be performance art. So they made a little plexiglass case for him in the museum in the center lobby. And he just made paper film all day while people kind of looked at him making the paper films. And so now he has a full facsimile, though, of a film that he could run through a projector, and it works. It's extraordinary.
So let's take some questions from the audience. Let's start over here on the aisle.
Thank you. Since everybody is probably going to ask a film question, I'd like to ask a music question. Thank you, pardon the pun, for the beautiful marriage of the Western instrument and the Eastern instrument. And I'd like to ask, do you work mostly on an improv basis, or do you write compositions? And also, please tell us the name of your CD.
So we have a duo name. We're Duo Yumeno, and we mostly, of course, there's not much repertoire written for koto and cello. So we mostly commission to living composers and have original pieces written for us, and we perform them. And we do some improv, but mostly, more like written music. And we have a few albums that are out there, and one is on the Naxos label, and you can find it's titled Heike Quinto. It's composed by Darren Hagen. He was a wonderful composer, and he composed a whole suite for us. So that's probably on the Naxos website.
Yoko, you had mentioned a traditional song you used for the 47 Ronin story, but were there any other? Were you able to do any research, or was there research available to know like what sort of songs or musics played originally with these films, or were they accompanied with music originally? I'm curious if you did anybody if you've some silent films from Hollywood, they might have distributed sort of like sheet music with the songs. Did that happen in the paper music context, or? Curious. No. I mean, did you do any? Were you able to do any research into? Or, I mean, did Eric? Do you have any research about the music that may have accompanied these films?
We have so little research at this point. It's one of the areas that we really want to develop, and we we know some of the films kind of designate music that should go with it, but we don't have a whole lot beyond that.
But these were mostly your original compositions for today?
Yes, yeah, mostly, and we use some folk music, children's songs, the Tanuki theme, and
So regarding traditional pieces, so sometimes I realized this is a blah blah piece. So when I saw very old Japanese movie, so my specialty is Yamada style koto music, which started in the middle of Edo period, and yeah. So the other day I saw the movie. I forgot the title, but actually the Yamada Kengyo's piece was used for the movie. Right. So I was so surprised.
is that the Pasolini movie?
Yeah, yeah.
Not
Yeah.
Medea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a very haunting scene where Pasolini quotes Yamada Kengyo's composition
Yeah.
in a very Greek setting.
Let's turn it back over to the audience. Let's go right down here in the center.
Thank you. I was just like two technical questions. What is the frame rate, and is this something that was sort of known, or did you have to sort of figure it out by the length of the music? And also, how is the film originally printed? Like, what was that process?
I'm going to start with the printing because that's easy in that I don't really know. We have a little bit of knowledge. So, like the live action films, we know that they were using like a photogravure process. But I want to cite Tsuyoshi Yamabata again because he is just starting his PhD dissertation, and it's going to be on the printing process for Japanese paper films. So I'm going to have an awesome answer for you in about 2 years. But this is kind of the thing that he has taken on, and he is actually at the stage where he is able to reproduce paper films using the techniques that he believes were being done. So every couple weeks I get some photos in the email of him kind of stamping using various printing techniques to make these. The frame rate question I could answer much better, which is there was no standard frame rate. So the projectors were hand cranked, and we could tell a couple of things from the films. At first, we were really excited when we got the soundtracks because we're like, we will finally know what the frame rate should be, because when we match the film to the soundtrack, all will be solved. But the films actually speed up and slow down to match the soundtrack, so they're not consistent. If I had to make a kind of rough estimate of what most stuff is, it's running between about 18 to 20 frames per second. But for matching the sound, we've had to slow it down to almost like 14 frames and like double print, and in some cases go up to almost 30 frames per second to keep up with the soundtrack. I will say Animal Olympics was a gift because it had so many like quacking and barking and wolves howling that made it very easy to sync the soundtrack and really give us a sense of the kind of, at least visually, what the film should look like as they were kind of running.
Thank you so much. Like the fact that we could actually see these wonderful animations tonight. We just want to thank you so much for the years of work and research that goes into the fact that we can see it tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it was really interesting to learn a little bit about the context of this original venue of how these films were seen. And I'm on the Southtown Neighborhood Council, and we're organizing a Japanese anime series this summer. I am very curious how we can get our permission to screen and share these wonderful, eccentric, offbeat animations to our residents here at Southtown, because I think specifically Southtown has a Japanese American long history with Japanese American here. So we're just curious, who do we reach out to?
That would be me.
I think there's a guy at the end of them.
Find me after the show, and we could see what could be done.
Okay, another question? We have another question? Okay, let's go in the back with the cap. Yes, we're gonna bring a mic to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, crazy. My question is oddly specific. I think that the film was called like something Line of Defense.
First national line of defense.
Yeah, I was curious to know who we were observing, what culture that was. I didn't want to make any assumptions.
So one of the things that's really exciting about showing these films, well, let me back up one step there. The live action films are typically copies of existing 35 millimeter films. I have a fairly strong feeling copyright was pretty fast and loose at this time period. And in many cases, I'm sure they were copying films that they did not necessarily go through the official channels of licensing the rights to copy the films. And as a result, they often cut off the titles. So in many cases, we are doing sleuthing to try to figure out even what the film is. And one of the great things about showing these at theaters is we often have audience members who are more of an expert on Southeast Asian islands and cultures than I am, which I have no expertise. But a audience member at a couple shows ago believes they are, and now I'm going to forget, but I have it written down, Togo, the Togo Islands, or Tongo? Tonga. So she was a anthropologist, and I think it was from the dance or some of the costuming that she felt this is where the films were from. So this will help us maybe track down the original 35 millimeter print to understand more about what the film is and what the original title is.
Thank you.
That is a great mystery because it seems like it should be like a military propaganda film, but instead we have islanders sometimes not wearing many clothes, and I don't know what was going on there. When we first saw that, we thought there was a total disconnect in that it had the wrong title, but we've now seen 3 copies of the same film with the same title. So that is going to be a great journal article one day for someone.
Another question with us? Right over here. Oh, let's bring the mic down to you.
First things first, I really appreciate like the aesthetic of this film, like this very like primitive but stylized aesthetic, like the train one, where it's like a realistic looking train, but it's all kind of cartoony. Also, the character designs are kind of fun. I just love the look of it. Like it's very rough and ready. Like it's the kind of aesthetic like I appreciate from the animation. It gives a very like European feel to it. And like there's obviously some Disney influence, like from North American animation studios, like you know, it's around the same time thing, but like you can see like elements of like Felix and Mickey, even Popeye at points. Like I just love that. I just love like how you can see like the influences like this early stage in film history.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, I didn't draw them, but I helped bring them back to life. I think there is a kind of tremendous cross-cultural influence going on in these films, and it's really fascinating to see. To me, there's a lot of Fleischer Studios kind of influence going on, but yeah, these are. It's a treasure trove of interesting material.
I mean, along those same lines, I mean, like literally the lines themselves are really fascinating and interesting, roughly drawn the way you described. But the color is also really quite striking too. I mean, the way the color interacts with the forms is, I mean, you can see that maybe some printing errors and stuff, but there's a little bit of like impressionistic, vibe going on there. But the colors are also very basic. There's just blues, reds, greens. I mean, just very, and no sort of mixing of the colors. Can you talk a little bit what we know about the color process? I mean, you mentioned how important color was for this
Right.
format, but how did they come up with these color schemes?
So I think in many cases they're limited to kind of printing technology because this is really coming out of printing processes, and so I think in some cases you could see like a lot of half toning going on in some of the films, but others are much more like almost like a four color separation printing process. So it could be seen in a couple of parts of the film, but basically behind the film we have effectively like a green screen for the perforations that we try to kind of key out, and we kept changing the color of the background behind the films because we were trying to pick a color that would never show up. And every time we picked one color, suddenly there would be a film with a lot of green in it, and so we changed to pink, and then there were a whole bunch of films with pink. So even though yellow and greens tend to dominate quite a bit, there is a bit of a range of color on some of the films. Each time we're kind of surprised that now we have a film that has a color that we were kind of hoping it wouldn't have, but it does. Yeah.
Keep throwing new things at you. Another question from the audience? Let's go right in the center here. Yeah, young person right there.
Two questions. The first one is, how big was the image that people would see when they watched it? And the second question is, that one film that had the child in the bed and he falls out, wasn't that taken from an early animated film that maybe from the United States that had a little character that fell out of bed, an early animated film?
I don't know. If you know the film, please tell us. I do think thematically there's a lot of kind of thematic copying going on, but it's very possible that there were some influence from a Western film or a different film that kind of influenced that particular film. And I'm sure, as many of you saw, if you were very eagle-eyed, I'm really hoping no one from Disney is here tonight.
There's lawyers in the lobby right now.
Yeah. I will lawyer up here before I go out. But there are some extremely Mickey-looking characters in Animal Olympics. And I'm sorry, can you repeat the first question again?
How big was the image that
how
people
big was the
would
image? Of
see when
course.
they watched it?
So from the facsimile that I've seen projected, it seems about kind of 6 feet by 6 feet is kind of ideal. And I'm also thinking about, I'm sure they were thinking when they were manufacturing projectors how big rooms are in a typical Japanese house. So I think you could make the image a bit bigger, but there might not actually be room in kind of typical Japanese rooms to kind of make the image much bigger by moving the projector back further.
Thank you.
We have time for a few more questions. Let's go right here on the aisle.
Thanks. I was just thinking to your question, maybe it was Little Nemo. Was there something, Little Nemo in Sleepyland? Or some, I think that is a trope in some movies. The kid falls out of bed, wakes up, as a way out. A couple questions. I'm thinking the brightness level that you were able to see in the test, it looked like some of the films had a little higher contrast and brighter whites than I imagined the paper would. And your trailer imagery and the titles and much of it looked what I imagined a paper. I love the look of the paper, and all the tears and flaws are really fascinating to the eye, as you said. To keep that in there keeps your eye dancing around. And it's a little bit like when I don't know, it's a gross comparison, but like the Zapruder film, when you see it with all the flaws, and it's been stabilized, for the Oliver Stone film, they tracked it and locked it down and made it look perfect and creamy, and you can see it like a real image. But it's so heartbreaking to see the original image. So I just want to say, and the last thing I just want to ask is, the stylistically, I feel like the colors are limited by probably what the printing would allow, and it reminded me, like in Warren Beatty's film and Dick Silbert, the work they did to come up with the look of Dick Tracy was very much based on, as you probably know, what could be printed in comic books and what people saw and what they saw growing up in the 30s and 40s in comic strips. And this has definitely the look of something printed. So I don't. If you find a few new colors, I'm sure they're still limited in the palette of what could be printed, and it's a fascinating look.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So just as a technical aside, when we scan the films, we have a teeny tiny little color chart that we kind of insert at the very, very beginning, so that when we're color grading, we could try to bring it back to what the original kind of looks like, in terms of what it looks like today in 2025, not what it originally would have looked like. At some future point, there may be a restoration project where we make it look a little cleaner, better, brighter, but we're really intentionally trying to be as hands-off as possible with this kind of first level of preservation. And so I'm happy that you were happy with the look.
Totally the right choice.
So, thank you.
We have time for one more question from the audience we have here. Let's go in the back.
How heavy is the paper stock of the original films?
I'm going to say I'm going to describe it in very layman's terms. It's thicker than printer paper, but thinner than cardstock. It's kind of in between those two things. It's very close to that. Yeah. So that would be kind of the texture feel in terms of the thickness of the paper. It does seem to vary quite a bit over the years and from film to film. Some of that could just be age, but I'm also imagining we were dealing with kind of what paper stock was available at what particular time that they could run things. So I would say there's a little bit of variation, but about kind of like, what paper tickets would feel like.
So, by way of sort of wrapping things up, I know you've been traveling the United States with New York, Chicago. You were just in Santa Barbara. You're here, but then in July, all three of you are going to be going to Japan to tour Japan with these films. Can you each talk a little bit just to wrap it, about what it means to you to bring these films back to Japan for this tour?
Sure. So the Yanai Initiative is sponsoring, I think 6 or 7 city tour, where we're doing sometimes multiple performances in various cities for Japan in June and July. And then in October, we're in Italy at the Pordenone Film Festival, which, if you have never been to Italy or Pordenone, it's magical. So if you want to see the films again, please just go to Italy or Japan. So for me, it's incredibly special, because to bring it full circle from what I started with in my introduction, Yoneo Ota sensei at the Toy Film Museum, our whole goal all along when we began this was, Ota sensei said, wouldn't it be amazing one day that you and I could just sit down and watch these movies? And this summer, we're going to be able to just sit down together and just watch these movies. And that means the world to me, to be able to do that. And one of the other collectors, Matsumoto sensei, who many of his films feature in our program tonight, when I first met with him, I kind of showed him a demonstration of like our machine and what it could do and how it worked, and how we had to kind of design it to be very purpose-built to handle paper films and only paper films. And he kind of looked at me and said, I've been waiting 40 years for this. And so there's nothing more gratifying than being able to bring that collection of his back to life. So yeah, we're gonna sit down and watch them together.
That's exciting. Yoko, and can you talk a little bit about what it means to you to bring these back?
Yeah, so when I received message from Eric Sensei, I immediately realized this project is really, really wonderful. But actually, I didn't expect this project is growing. So recently, I feel so the low technology has very, very meaningful. So nowadays, technology is growing very quickly, maybe too much aggressively. But so human craftsmanship is always wonderful. So I'm very, very honored to be part of this wonderful project and go back to Japan with this wonderful project. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just excited to share this experience with the people from the homeland of where this was born. This is sort of like letter from the past from our ancestors, and I just want to share that experience. I'm so excited, and I'm also hoping that somebody who might have watched the paper film when they're children, I would love to meet these people and share the love for the film with them. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, we can't wait to discover more and scan more and preserve more. We'll have your back. So thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Really honored.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.